Hi, my name is Carly Schrader, and this is the muscle fiber. And right here is the sarcolemma, and this functions as the cell membrane. And then this right here is the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and that's an altered SER that surrounds myofibril in the network. And next are the T tubules, and these are all throughout the muscle. And these are part of the sarcolemma that's composed of narrow tubules that create channels through the muscle fibers. These tubules also release calcium. And last, this is the sarcomere right here. And that is it's a unit of the myofibril that contracts. It's composed of an area from the Z disc to the next Z disc, which would be this right here. And then there would be another one over here.
Hi, I'm Sierra Glick, and the first step to the process of a muscle fiber contraction is excitation. This is when the action potential from the nerve triggers action potentials in the muscle fiber. The step to this is when the action potential is created in the motor neuron, and then the action potential reaches the axon terminal, and the voltage change releases the calcium channels, and the calcium enters the neuron. When calcium causes these vesicles to bind to the plasma membrane and release acetylcholine, and then the acetylcholine crosses the synapse and binds to the sarcolemma's receptors. And this is when the ion channels open and sodium is released into the sarcolemma. This is when depolarization begins. Local depolarization causes the AP to spread out, which is action potential, and action potential moves along the sarcolemma into the T tubules. The second step to muscle contraction is excitation, contraction crippling. It's a series of events that connects the sarcolemma and the myofilaments, activates them for contraction. This is when the action potential opens the calcium channels on the terminal cisternae with the voltage channel. The calcium then exits the sarcoplasmic reticulum and goes into the sarcoplasm. Next, calcium works with the troponin-tropomyosin complex. This is when the calcium binds to troponin, and troponin changes shape, which moves the tropomyosin. The tropomyosin exposes binding sites of actin, making it able to bind to myosin.
I'm Lydia Rowley, and I'll be talking about the next step, which is contraction. Contraction is tension and shortening of the muscle fiber. And the steps are: the ATP binds to the myosin head, which can be seen here, and starts hydrolysis, which moves the head. Cross bridge forms as the myosin head attaches to actin through the active site. And you can see that illustrated here. The power stroke then occurs within the myosin and actin filaments as myosin moves over actin, which is the actual physical contraction of the muscle. After that, recovery stroke occurs in the myosin as myosin binds to a new ATP molecule and releases from the active site. The final step of muscle contraction is relaxation. This is when action potentials stop and conditions return to normal. So the myosin-actin bond releases, and so the muscle re-lengthens, and repolarization in the sarcolemma occurs through closing sodium channels and potassium leaving the cell. Calcium is also returned by the sarcoplasmic reticulum through the use of an ATPase pump. There's a change in troponin due to the loss of calcium, and the active sites are blocked. Through this, the muscle relaxes.
Hi, my name is Abby, and I will be discussing ions and proteins, whether they being regulatory or contractile. So first is myosin and actin, and they are contractile. And here's actin and myosin. They mediate the sliding contractile filaments to make the muscle contract. The next one is troponin and tropomyosin, so these two right here. And they are regulatory because troponin binds to calcium, which changes its shape and move tropomyosin. The myosin binding site on the actin is exposed. This change allows for contraction. And also calcium is another one, and that is regulatory, and that binds right there and does the exact same thing as troponin. So now I will be identifying the processes in a muscle contraction that use ATP and predict what will happen at each step if ATP is not available. So first, excitosis is when acetylcholine is released. So that would be right here. Without ATP and acetylcholine, they would not be released, and the cell would not depolarize, and the AP would not continue to travel. Contraction would not occur, so it would not move that way. Next is myosin binding to the actin, which occurs right here. Without ATP, this could not occur. For the muscle fibers to contract, this binding must happen. Next would be sodium, potassium, and ATP pump. This returns the conditions of the cell to be normal. Without ATP, this cannot happen. Next would be the calcium solute pump, and that would occur right here. And calcium would be back to the cytoplasmic reticulum. Without this process, the conditions in the cell would not be able to return to normal.
This is Carly Schrader talking again, and lastly we'll be talking about two scenarios and predict the effects they have on the quality of muscle contraction. So first we'll be discussing a person that has anemia, which is a lack of healthy red blood cells, which you can see right here. There's much more in normal blood than there is in anemic blood. And so because of that, there's less cells that carry oxygen to your body's tissues, and this can cause muscle weakness and muscle pain and aches that are all typical symptoms of iron deficiency. The muscles do not have enough energy to function properly. The next scenario that we will be talking about is a person that's dehydrated, and with this, it's not having enough water, and this can change the concentration gradients of your sodium, calcium, and potassium levels. This could also change the charge of your muscle fiber, and it affects aerobic respiration, which is the main ATP production of your muscles, and that's what helps you move. And overall, your oxygen levels, which are required to make the ATP, will be low, so your muscles will not contract as well, and this also leads to muscle cramping, which would be uncontrollable movements of your muscles, so then they would not function properly.